Hello and welcome to the channel. Right here is the site of the original Rue farmstead, settled in the 1830s, before it became the Muirhead Farm.
Northern Illinois, worth working and fighting for. Full of serene beauty and promise is the sky over the good, productive earth. No bright bunting flies in the summer air. No bands are playing. Yet here, free men, women, and their children are working from sun to sun, working against shortages in many of their essentials, but working with a grim, resolute courage and typical American ingenuity to make out with what they have, to win a total war, to bring victory and peace to a troubled world.
This house, now gone, torn down over 10 years ago, was the last remaining remnant of the Muirhead Farm. There have been many stories about this house, and in this video I will explore those stories. The first story involves a boy named Joel Rue. He was born in 1849, and records show that he died in 1859, just short of his 10th birthday. Joel Rue was one of 10 children, the son of Schuyler Rue and Hannah Rue. The family had a farm that spanned many acres, established in the 1830s. Joel Rue will be the center of this story. The boy may have passed away in 1859, but there have been sightings of him in and around the property. Located in Plato Township, just west of Elgin Township, where Elgin, back in the day, was a major hub for farmers and other commerce. One resident recalls a ghostly encounter. It was the first week of January 1999. A record-setting blizzard was in full swing. The witness recalls being a boy of about 8 himself. He recalls changing into his pajamas as a part of the bedtime routine. The bedroom he was in had 2 twin beds, one of the beds being adjacent to the door. Being an 8-year-old with a chance of a snow day, the witness was quite excited. He recalls jumping on the bed closest to the door, to then jump out of the room through the doorway. However, as soon as he landed on the bed, he then noticed that they were not alone in this bedroom. Standing about a foot away from him on the bed was the apparition of a child. The child had red hair, bluish eyes, missing teeth, and freckles. He also seemed to be dressed in dated attire, perhaps from the mid-19th century. The ghost stood frozen, smiling, as the living child stood in paralyzed fear. After seeing this ghost child and staring him in the eyes for what seemed like an eternity, the earthly child jumped off the bed and ran straight out of the bedroom. Was this the case of an excited 8-year-old's imagination gone wild, or was it an actual encounter with a spirit from long ago? If these spirits do exist, is it just residual energy that lingers in the area? A lonely spirit just looking for a playmate, or something far more sinister? Whatever the explanation may be, this living history has been seen by multiple people, which makes even the biggest skeptics question, are there ghosts among us?
In the northwest of the United States, the Sauk and Fox Indians had maintained their territory along the Mississippi River in Illinois. The Fox Indians numbered about 1,600, and the Sauk numbered roughly about 4,800. In 1804, William Henry Harrison, the governor of the Indiana Territory, drew up the Treaty of St. Louis, which bought and overtook all of the Foxes' and Sauks' land. The treaty allowed them to stay on it until the U.S. decided they had to leave. In return for their land in Illinois, the Sauk and Fox Indians received a small amount of money and were guaranteed the right to hunt and plant their corn in a designated area of the land. However, the Fox and Sauk leaders felt that the treaty was invalid because the 2 signers on behalf of the Indian tribes were unqualified to speak for them. In 1828, the Sauk and Fox Indians were given 1 year's notice to leave their land under the Treaty of 1804. The Sauk and Fox war leader, who had been known to cause trouble for the U.S. government, Black Hawk had fought alongside the British in the War of 1812 against the U.S. He felt the Treaty of 1804 was completely invalid, and that they had been forced to move unjustly from their land. In 1830, Black Hawk and a band of followers returned to Sakanuka lands to plant and harvest their annual crops as had been promised to them in the treaty, but found them occupied by white settlers. Their designated land had been overrun by white homes, and the settlers had even gone so far as to build houses over the Indian graves. As a consequence, Black Hawk and his followers were not able to harvest their corn. The Sauk and Fox nearly starved to death that season.
Our next story is absolutely chilling. One afternoon, some bored teenagers decided to go explore an abandoned house. The house was on a rural road with a grove of pine trees. The road made a gentle bend, in which the tree line followed. The house, which was green, always had a certain aura to it. The house looked like a moment set still in motion for over a century, back to a time where railroads were the main mode of transportation, along with the horse and buggy. A very different time, but a difference the house and property did not seem to notice. The house had 2 stories and a creepy old staircase to a basement. Property records from the time date the house to at least the 1890s, if not older. The original farmstead was settled by Schuyler Rue in the 1840s, according to sales records recorded by the federal government. Schuyler and Hannah Rue had 10 children. One of them, however, passed away at the age of 10. Stories of a ghost wandering on and around the Rue farmstead have been reported. Sometimes it is seen as a dark figure, other times as a young boy. The boy is said to be dressed in clothes from around the Civil War era. The teenagers made their way into the house. At the time, there was a front door that didn't lock and it was easily accessible. The house was abandoned for at least 20 years and had seen better days. It was no secret that it was a place for local teens to hang out and blow off some steam. The inside of the house was filled with empty bottles and other trash. The walls had graffiti all over them, and in some spots, the wall was torn away, exposing the shiplap behind the old plastered wall. The house was also permeating an odor. It was a mix of dead animals, mold, and structural decay. Why it took so long for the house to be torn down is another mystery upon itself. The teens that entered the house that night would get more than they bargained for. A heavy thunderstorm came out of nowhere. This forced the subjects who had been hanging outside the house to go through the front door to take shelter from the storm. The witness interviewed said, right from the start, that him and the other intruders were not alone in that house. A dark presence was in the house with them. It was then that the witness reported going down to the basement. This is where the story gets more intense. The 3 teens who were now in the basement began to hear footsteps and other sounds coming from above the basement. As the storm intensified, the sounds of footsteps from the floor above also became louder. There was definitely someone or something in the house, and it was making its presence known. It was obvious that everyone had their thrills and now wanted to leave, so they waited until the storm died down. That was when they decided to go up the stairs and exit through the front door. However, there was a problem. At the top of the basement stairs there was a figure. A dark, shadowy figure that seemed to be watching them. Terrified with no way out besides the stairs, the boys felt trapped. After 5 minutes, a 5 minutes that seemed like an eternity, it was then that they decided what they needed to do. They bolted up the stairs and ran through the dark apparition and straight out of the house.